Phew. Hey guys, thanks a lot for making it at short notice. Stephanie, Terry, Dean, is there anyone else here? Danielle Williams, good to see you as well. Onesie, good to see you. So we're going to be going through some of the highlights of the Lifetime movie. Have any of you guys, have you seen the movie yet? Anyone here seen it? According to the poll, couple of you have voted. There are a couple of yeses, and then a couple of far more no's. But a few of you have seen it. Those of you who have seen it, what were your thoughts? What was the sort of biggest thing that stood out to you? Besides Skylar Samuel's tan, or lack of it, I should say. Any thoughts? Fee says too soon. Yeah, that is the prevailing thought here. I'm going to be addressing that. I'm going to be talking about, is that fair? Is that a fair comment? Has there been any, or have there been any other creators talking about Gabby Petito slash the movie? I haven't seen anything, but maybe I was too busy working on preparing for this episode. Sharon says, I cannot emotionally watch it. Okay. Terry says, already know I'm not going to be impressed. Haha. Okay. Mel says, I haven't seen it. Mel, are you going to see it? Stephanie says, I was hoping to see it. Yvonne says, not yet. Yvonne also said she's not going to watch Dharma, which I can definitely understand. I kind of wasn't either. And then I thought, I suppose it's my job. It's my job to watch that sort of thing. Timmy, if I put you on my lap, you're going to knock over my coffee. But anyway, let's see what we can do. Jay says no one else seems to be talking about it. That's sort of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about, like, a couple of months ago, it was getting 1 billion views. The hashtag Gabby Petito is getting 1 billion views, and now nobody cares. No one wants to talk about it. Joe says, I've been busy with the Dharma Netflix series. Jay said, it was honestly very hard to watch, especially because they depicted all the body cam footage and photos so well. I followed the case so close. It was really intense. And also, I've been in seriously, or ill seriously. But that is often the case, is you so invested. So when you watch the film, it's actually quite stressful. I've written books on certain cases, and I find the Lifetime so upsetting. Jodi Arias is one of those cases that I actually have to watch it in pieces because I actually can't deal with the stress of what isn't addressed or what is left out, or all of that. That disconnect is so sometimes severe and so disconcerting, and actually makes you feel distressed, makes you feel unhappy, makes you feel miserable, right? Beverly says, so many signs of Brian's erratic behavior, but Gabby was too young to see it. Terry says, I didn't know there was a movie about Petito. Yeah, it came out yesterday my time. It's 5:30 in the morning here, but it's just come out on Lifetime. So Fee says, I need to digest what I just watched. Okay. Ricardo says, I just finished Dharma. So that is something we're also going to be covering on this channel, the Dharma story. How well a job does Netflix do covering it, which is exactly what we're asking here. How well a job did Lifetime do on covering a story that we all cared about? Didn't we all care about it? So we just want to care a little bit more and say, well, how well a job did they do? Did they do a good job? What did they get right? What did they not get right? Eric says, I don't do lives. Why are we still talking about Gabby? I thought this case was cut and dried and done with. Is there something in the Lifetime movie that's worth discussing? We are going to do that. Eric, I must say, if you come here to say why are we talking about this, then, if you come onto a live to say why are we talking about it, that's a very quick way to get booted off. But so mods, just be aware. I really am not going to tolerate why are we like a discussion on why are we talking about something, really. It's incredible. If you don't want to talk about something, then go to a channel that's talking about what you want to talk about. Don't go there to talk about not talking about something. Matt Clemens says, hi mods, I'm not sure I'd watch though, like you, can't quite see what you're saying there. Judy says, not to mention ever or never getting over the Chris Watts case. That's a bit more, 4 years later, that's definitely worth talking about. But I think, are you supposed to forget about cases? Are you supposed to, I don't want to say let them go, because I think there's something to that, but are you supposed to, it never happened, I'm not going to think about it? Ricardo says that Dharma Netflix was kind of weak. Well, I found it pretty tough to watch, I must say. Joe Huck says the Gabby story memorized. I think you mean mesmerized. Mesmerized us for months. Why not cover the movie? That's really my perspective. I don't think it's really crazy or radical. But the fact is that the story, that the Lifetime depiction is derivative. Obviously, it's going to be different to reality. The question is it reasonably different or unreasonably different, right? Stephanie says, I think when they mean so much to you, you revisit it because hopefully we can learn from these cases. Well said. Okay, yeah, so you said maybe interesting. That's really what we are yet to find out. Is it interesting? Is it worthwhile, right? So I'm going to be referring to this excellent article from, you may remember his name, Michael Ruiz from Fox News. He wrote a lot of articles on the Petito case while it was happening in real time. And Michael Ruiz has obviously felt, wow, I wonder whether this movie touches on the things that I wrote about, the things that I saw, the things that I reported on. And so that he's done exactly that. And so that is what I'm really going to be touching on. He talks about authentic notes in the movie, right? And so that's what I'm going to be highlighting, about 7 authentic notes, some more authentic than others, but I think definitely interesting to touch upon, right? Okay, so it's a great article. So I'm putting a link in the chat. If you want to read about it, I've also put a link in the description, right? So that's really the sort of meat and bones that we are going to base our analysis on, and then go from there to things that we know about, right? That's kind of the idea. So let's get going. So I must say, I find it ironic that Lifetime has been attacked for covering the Gabby Petito case during a climate when creators covering the Kylie Rodney case are complaining of being attacked. Right? Aren't they allowed to share their thoughts as well? Well, isn't Lifetime allowed to share theirs? Aren't they allowed to speculate? Well, isn't Lifetime allowed to do the same? Is it okay to have an opinion on anything in true crime? Well, isn't Lifetime allowed to have an opinion? aren't they allowed to have an interpretation? Michael Ruiz from Fox News has put together 7 authentic notes from the Gabby Petito drama. He would know because, like Brian Enton, he was literally out there on the ground investigating, interviewing, writing, and reporting. And so, having written all of these articles, he kind of wants to know, did they get it right? Right? He wants to know, did Lifetime get right what I was living and reporting on? And did Lifetime see the story that I saw? Right? It's kind of a conscientious thing. It's like, did you do a good job? I was there, I followed this, I know what's going on. Well, did this other person covering the story do it properly? Right? Isn't that a reasonable question to ask? So there he says, I'm not going to go through the article like it is here. I'm going to deal with sections of it. But he says, it's a dramatization of true crime events. And then, very interesting, it has certain fictional moments bridging the gaps. And that's really the critical question, is whether these fictional moments are reasonable. Do they ring true? Do they resonate, or don't they? Do some of them resonate while others don't? There are always gaps in true crime. And then the question is, what is the reality there? What really happened? And I always find that fascinating. I think part of that is understanding the psychology of the people involved, right? Trying to find out what someone is hiding, what they really feel, what they really think, what their true motives are, right? Yvonne says, sure, Lifetime can have an opinion. Eric says, this case touches me because I'm a mountain biker where I live, and we all go to Moab all the time. Okay. So I hope you're going to find this analysis meaningful and touching, right? So let's start with where the movie starts. So did you guys know that the movie opens with the Moab incident? What do you guys think of that? Like, if you think about it, if you're in the place of a narrator, if you were telling Gabby Petito's story, if you were writing the book of Gabby Petito, how would you start? Where would you start? Would you start kind of at the beginning with Gabby being born? Would you start at the end with where Gabby's remains were found? Would you start in the park where Brian was found? Where would you open your story to have sort of not only maximum effect, but the kind of logical place to start, the logical place to start digging and thinking, right? And I think this is a very good place to start, is the Moab incident. So this is his assessment. He says the movie begins with a Moab police officer pulling the couple over. And so that is number 1 of 7. We're going to be dealing with a total of 7. This is the first one. 7 authentic notes, right? So the first one is the opening. And there's another scene from the movie, right? And my assessment of this, as I say, is if the idea is to anchor Gabby's story in facts, in incontrovertible reality, there's no better place to start than the raw footage of the Moab incident. You've got so much to work with. You've got so much that is right there that you can work with. And then you can also ask questions and say, well, what don't we know? And then maybe we can dramatize that. And one of the things is, who hit who first? Did Brian hit Gabby? And how did that play out? This thing that the Moab incident is all about, what did that look and feel like? The thing that everyone's talking about, what did that actually look and feel like? So that is a really good place to start thinking about dramatizing and finding your way into the heart of the story. Do you agree? I just wish that they'd given the Gabby actress a tan, because this is actually what Gabby looked like, right? And I hate to be sort of pedantic about it, but even Gabby's hair is totally different to the actresses. She's got lovely, sort of silky golden hair, sort of sun bleached hair, and the actress playing her sort of has totally different hair as well. And this to me raises a kind of an interesting point, which is also kind of obvious, but I think it's worth saying. Gabby's actually a really attractive young woman, in sort of a unconventional way. She's sort of not a conventionally beautiful young woman. She's sort of not a typical Instagram babe, right? And it's quite strange when I search for something on Instagram. Instagram shows me all sorts of women in, wearing bikinis and so on. And it's like Instagram's telling me that's what I want to see, and I sort of feel like sometimes exactly what I want to see isn't exactly what I want to see, right? It's the thing Bruce Banner said at one point. It's the same kind of thing. Gabby's not the kind of conventional bimbo. She's an artist. There's something fragile about her. There's an aspect to her that's emotional and anxious, but she's kind of got a fragile, delicate beauty about her, right? And I don't know whether this actress captures that, if you know what I'm getting at. And also, I just wish they'd cast someone who was younger. Nothing against this actress, but Gabby was younger. You're only going to capture that fragile, beautiful fragility in a sense, by casting someone younger. So, just in terms of that, it's a little disappointing. But I mean, when it comes to Lifetime, you kind of got to accept that, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard to overstate that Gabby was a really pretty girl. And I think that's what this is all about, is that Brian was found her very pretty as well. Brian thought she was incredibly attractive. Brian wanted to hold on to that. Brian wanted to control that. Brian wanted all of that to himself. Someone who's very pretty like that's also going to catch other people's attention. If you, Brian, how do you manage that? How do you stop that? How do you deal with that, right? And so, just on the simple subject matter of Gabby was pretty, you actually open a lot in terms of the dynamics of a jealous boyfriend. It's not just that he's jealous of her, he's jealous of someone who's not only prettier, but she's becoming even prettier. If you go through Gabby's Instagram, you can actually see she's becoming even more beautiful. There's a stunning photo of her in the Zion, with wearing a Zion sweater. She looks really, very beautiful, right? And Brian obviously saw that, and Brian wanted that, and Brian wanted to possess that. But it was also like, well, I don't want anyone else to have that, right? And that's where Brian's faults come into it. Was Brian a very good looking guy? Was Brian a fully formed person? Was Brian mature? Was Brian the right guy for Gabby to marry? Right? All those kinds of things. And I'm just saying, all of that just comes out of this idea of, wow, she was actually quite pretty, right? It's a very obvious thing, but in a way you don't give it air. You don't give that obvious thought attention when you should. Robert says, is it on Netflix? No, it's on Lifetime. Matt says 100% with his insecurities, no wonder. Danielle says she was blossoming in every way. Was he blossoming? I mean, he was bald and only going even more bald. And I can tell you, as a bald guy, baldness isn't fun. You don't feel like, wow, I'm becoming really attractive, unless maybe Sean Connery. Yeah, Mel says Brian was not attractive. So just on that, she's really pretty. She's becoming even more beautiful, and he's not pretty. And what do you do with that? And she's going on social media, and what are people saying? And people are noticing her on social media, and his job is almost to make sure she gets noticed on social media. Eric says most of us have had to let go of our first love in life. And it's difficult. I know letting go of my first love was tough, definitely was tough. I don't know what it was like for you. It is tough. It's something we can all think about and talk about. What's that song? The first cut is the deepest. So can you see how we're already having quite a meaningful conversation? We haven't really even gotten started about Gabby Petito, and it still resonates. It's still real, right? It's still relevant. Okay, so let's continue. The next one is Gabby hits Brian. So this is already where you feel like there's quite a tough responsibility. Whoever tells the story, whether you Lifetime or an author or a reporter or someone making a documentary, you feel like this is a tricky area because it's actually not 100% clear what happened, and you want to do justice to the story. You want to tell the true story, but the problem is you can't be sure what the true story is. That's where that responsibility becomes quite kind of, it's like a pressure and a responsibility, right? So this is quoting from the article by Michael Ruiz. He says, in the film, Petito slaps laundry. So in the Lifetime movie, Petito slaps laundry. You see that dramatized, and she does it first outside the Moonflower Co-op in an organic grocery in the middle of town, right? And I think that's this depiction. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that is that depiction. He goes on to say the real life chain of events remain unclear. She insisted on body camera video that she hit him first. And there it is. I guess, but I hit him first. So what do you do with that? You know, Gabby in her own words is saying, yeah, well, I hit him first, right? So is that what you then show in your documentary? You show Gabby hitting Brian. Already it feels like you might be getting the story wrong, right? This is again going back to this article about the dramatizations from Michael Ruiz. It says the scene at the Moonflower is recreated with other references to the couple's claims on body cam video, including an argument over laundry tracking sand and dirt into the van. Now, I must say I find that quite interesting, is this idea that Brian is dirty and he's coming into the van with dirty feet, maybe hasn't washed, and he's literally, you know, dirtying the inside of the van. And Gabby's not very happy with that. And that's another thing that is absolutely typical of relationships. Often men are dirtier than women, and often women will complain and say, pick that up or clean that or whatever. And you can imagine it even more so when you're in the close confines of a van in the middle of summer. You're sweaty, the flies going round. You know, your van is your home, but it doesn't come with an ensuite bathroom or shower. And it's the middle of summer. So on the one hand, you can understand Gabby getting fed up. On the other hand, you can also understand Brian being dirty and kind of shrugging and saying, "Oh, what do you expect? What am I supposed to do?" Right? But that is certainly one of the things that they did argue about. But you would imagine, a mature couple would sort of deal with that. In Gabby's case, maybe she would kind of accept that to some extent. In Brian's case, try a bit harder to be clean. But do you remember right at the beginning of the Moab incident, where she's with the police, she talks about being quite OCD. I think that OCD had to do with him being dirty. And you can, it's not really necessarily OCD, it's, can you please not dirty the inside of the van that I've just cleaned? I've just made it tidy. Can you please not just mess it up in a kind of a reckless way? Can you respect my efforts here, right? Louise says it depends on how hard she hit him. She may have felt intimidated too. Well, there is a news article that talks about a third witness, a guy called Chandler, who said that he saw Brian hit her in a slapping motion, but with his fist closed, so hard that she actually got struck on the head and she fell back against the van. Young Byron says, I watched the movie, but it was too basic. What do you mean by that? Basic how? Mel says the trouble with recreations is not knowing how much license has been taken. In a way, that is the whole thing with true crime, or the way true crime should be. If you imagine a lawyer in court, the missing piece, he's got to imagine that is what happened, and then it's got to resonate with a judge or with a jury. The story's got to resonate. That idea of recreating, you do in your mind, you do in a narrative to some extent. Yeah, the van was their home. She wanted it to be clean. It makes sense. So that's another thing I think the Lifetime movie may show, is just the reality. You see the van, you see photos of Gabby inside the van, but now you're seeing her sitting in the van. There's a scene where she's sitting in the van talking to Rose, but where you're getting a practical sense of, well, this space has got to be maintained. Like the same way that you get up in the morning, you make your bed, you clean the bedroom. Well, she's got to clean the van, or someone's got to clean the van. And that practical aspect is something that you're now seeing in the dramatization in a way that you don't quite see it just by looking at still images or Instagrams, right? Okay. So although it's true that Gabby said she hit Brian first, and I think she probably did, it's also true that Brian also hit Gabby. So I would be interested to see if the dramatization included in the Lifetime movie, if it included Brian hitting Gabby. So I must put my hand up and say, sorry, I haven't actually watched the Lifetime movie, so I don't know. Those who have watched it, is it depicted anywhere Brian hitting Gabby? I would just be interested to know that. Andy says, I hate to say it, but they needed to show the violence of her murder. I must say that to me is one of the weaknesses of this, is that they sort of feel like they can't. It's like crossing a line in terms of sensitivity. I agree that is important and necessary to think about, but I also feel like in terms of entertainment, and strictly speaking, Lifetime movies are meant to be entertainment, that is crossing, I think, a kind of a cultural line and a kind of a moral line. So I understand it. From a true crime perspective, I understand what you're saying as well. The same applies to autopsy photos and evidence. It's some of the most crucial evidence, but it's not really for public consumption or entertainment, and it shouldn't be. Young Byron says, just the basic story and the situation from my point of view, we all feel different. Okay. So young Byron, do they show Brian ever hitting Gabby? Julie says, Lifetime tried to recreate Shanann's moment and it was inaccurate and awful. That's the other side. You try and deal with the most important part, arguably, in terms of the subject matter, the end of someone's life, and then you don't even get that right. Can you imagine if you were murdered and someone depicted it in a totally wrong way? You suffered, you experienced pain, you experienced something very specific, and it's very important. It's your last moment of life. Imagine if you could see that, what you'd think about it if it was depicted in a totally wrong way. Eric says, I miss the true journalism I grew up with. Me too. I miss proper journalism, and I know it's unreasonable, but I miss proper journalism in true crime, definitely. Okay. So the other thing I didn't really like too much about this is it looks like they didn't really use the Moonflower Co-op location. In other words, they didn't actually film it in the parking lot with the configuration of where would vehicles be and where would tables be and where did this incident occur, where were people driving by, where were traffic lights, where did somebody call 911. By not shooting this scene in the place where it happened, you lose the ability to make those practical connections, to think, wow, it would have been obvious, or how on earth could they argue in such an obvious space? It must mean they were arguing all the time. Was their relationship so getting that out of hand, right? So you lose a lot of insight by not going to these locations. And one imagines that if they did go to the location, if they did go to the Moonflower Co-op, they would have been told, you may not film here. We are not going to let you film here. It's bad publicity. So that's the other side. So if you feel like, well, throwing a stone at Lifetime, well, even if they went there, probably they would be told, you will not shoot on our premises. So then what do? How do you do that? Do you try and recreate it in a different way? What are your options, right? I thought I actually had a picture of the actual co-op here, but I don't quite have it at hand, unfortunately. I might actually have it if you guys give me a moment, I can bring it up. Maybe I must just Google it. Moonflower. With one hand. There it is. Right, does that ring a bell, that particular image there? There's not too many images of the outside of it, but I guess there are some. Would that have been so difficult to recreate? Okay. So that's really the nature of Lifetime movies. You win some, you lose some. They hit the right notes here and then clumsily completely miss others in other areas. And that then brings us to what I think is a fantastic aspect that Michael Ruiz highlights, that the Lifetime movie does touch on, and that's this one. That's this one. Gabby introduces Brian to her mother. It's a very important moment, right? It's a very important moment in any serious relationship. What 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 your parents think of your partner, and what your partner thinks of your parents, and then what you think about that whole dynamic as well. Do you take it seriously? Do you listen to criticism? Does the criticism matter? Do you ignore the criticism? Do you rebel against the criticism? Also, how does your partner feel about the criticism? Do they keep bringing it up and throwing it at you? Do they expect you to defend them? Yeah. Okay, so according to this article, right, this is another authentic note. Quote, Fox News Digital reported in October 2021 that Laundrie worked at a Long Island nursery, obviously in New York, in his hometown of Blue Point, New York. The film makes a mention of this in a scene where Petito first introduces him to her mother and stepfather. So that's her biological mother, Nicole Schmidt, and her stepfather. And then in the dramatization, obviously, her mother reacts in somewhat of a critical way. She's got a little bit of some reservations. And so Gabby responds, Mom, you're such a Gen Xer, right? Movie Gabby, the actress playing Gabby, responds to her mother's sort of reservations by saying, Mom, you're such a Gen Xer. What does she mean by that? And by the way, her mother is played by the director, Thora Birch. So the TCRS assessment, this is such an important part of the fabric of this case. And a year later, it remains something of a mystery. There's still something of a puzzle piece missing in this area. And it's this question of Brian's relationship with Gabby's parents and their relationship with him. We know that they were engaged. That's a serious relationship. We know, and obviously parents care, and they should care, and are involved, and they should be involved in serious relationships when it comes to their daughters or sons or whatever. And so we know that Brian and Gabby wanted to get married. Well, how did the parents feel about this? How did the parents really feel about this? And that's where a dramatization can really come into its own and show, actually, you know what, this is how the parents felt about this. It's a big deal. It's an important question that was never really addressed during the coverage of it. Even when the parents were actually asked in interviews by the mainstream media, it wasn't really addressed. Do you remember this interview? First ever interview on Dr. Phil, right? Let me do that. Do you remember Dr. Phil asking Joe, I think, what did you think about Brian? Do you remember that? And do you remember his answer? Danielle says her parents had reservations for a reason, but sometimes need to tread lightly. Well said. You definitely you definitely got that. It says, does the streamer ever interact with his followers? Not sure what that's about. Helen Back says, I just found out my old boyfriend used to get punched by his dad sometimes because he didn't want us dating because I was a different religion. He never told me that. Okay. Even then, Gabby took upon herself more than she needed to. It's tough when parents disapprove. It adds another element of anxiety to a relationship, especially a serious relationship. Beverly says it did show them arguing and hitting each other. Eric says, my take on don't be such a Gen X is my generation married around 30, not 20. Eric, I think that's actually a reference to him not having a job, and that social media, making a living from social media, is a way that you can make a living, and that her mother didn't really think so. And I even as a social media, a person who works in social media myself, I would tend to agree and say, yeah, you may struggle to make a living from social media if you aren't already. In other words, if you expecting to make a living from it, if you feel like I will make a living from it, well, before you are, maybe that's not something that you must try and rely on, right? Do you get what I'm trying to say? If you say, you know what, I'm not going to study at college, I'm not going to do this, I'm not even going to get a job, I'm going to make a living from social media. I don't know if I would be that confident. Some people can, not everyone can. Could Brian? Not sure. You know, if Gabby and Brian had not both died, could Brian have made it on social media? I don't know. I somehow think not. I don't know what you guys think. So we want to know, you know, they engaged. The parents want to know what's going on because they're engaged. They want to know. We know they wanted to get married, and so how did the parents feel about that? We know they went on the van life epic in the summer of 21 as a kind of response to the virus. So I don't know if you guys remember, that also came up in the media as, you know, why did they go on the summer epic? Like, why did the summer epic happen? And there's this sort of fairy tale story of they always wanted to travel, and they always and they were creative sort of people, whatever. But there's another side to that story. They did that because they couldn't get married. And you say, well, they couldn't get married because of the virus, but that's not the only side to the story. They also couldn't get married because they weren't allowed to, because they didn't have approval, right? That's the part that you could sort of dramatize. Is someone saying, no, you can't get married. You don't have a job. Now's not the right time. Wait till you're older. How does Brian react? How does Gabby react? How do they talk about that afterwards? You know, you can imagine Brian sulking and Brian complaining and Gabby trying to sort of make it better, right? You can imagine Brian feeling undermined and angry. And also, I think part of that is because it's true, because he's not ready to get married, because they are not ready to get married, because it's valid that how are you going to look after her when you're married, when, you know, long term, when you can you look after her now, right? So going back to the article, oh, so by the way, just coming back to this image, this is from the Petito interview, their first interview on Dr. Phil. When asked about when asked about how they felt, Gabby's parents kind of failed to give an answer. You know, they didn't really provide a lot of detail. When Gabby's father went on to Dr. Phil in September 2021, he admitted to referring to Brian as Brianna and making fun of him. And so you actually had this article come out at the time. Do you guys remember this article? Gabby Petito's dad mocked Brian with a nickname. Remember that? So if you just look at what we're doing here, you're kind of going, oh, yes, I remember that. But you may have forgotten that if not for the Lifetime movie, right? You may have forgotten that some of this stuff was going on if not for the Lifetime movie. In other words, the movie offers you a chance to remember. And maybe you say, I don't want to remember. Well, then you don't have to remember. You can not watch it. But it does offer you the opportunity to remember. And this is one of the things you can remember. And think about in more detail. So this whole idea of, so this is from the article. I've never actually liked any of Gabby's boyfriends. That's what Joe said. I've never actually called any of them by their real name ever. I always try to use the female versions of the boyfriends' names just to intimidate them a bit. Now look at those words. Just to intimidate them a bit. So think about that just in a general sense. And I'm just asking you to think. You don't have to form a judgment, just think about it. Think about the idea of a man trying to intimidate a younger man, right, regarding his child, right, regarding, in a way, perhaps trying to control or influence how his child is treated, right? And then this idea of that man that was with Gabby, just trying to intimidate Gabby a little bit. Just think about that psychology. I just want to try and intimidate you a little bit. What do you think was going on at the Moonflower Co-op? Wasn't that a bit of intimidation? And if you think about it, Brian and Gabby were both kind of intimidated by life. They were both kind of anxious individuals that don't really need additional intimidation, especially not Gabby. Okay, sorry, Timmy. Right? Gabby doesn't really need further intimidation. Just bring this up. Where's that other image? I'm looking for that one. Gabby really doesn't need further intimidation. She needs to be cared for. She needs kindness. She needs protection. She needs love, right? She needs care, support, all those kinds of things. She was trying to start a blog. She needs someone to believe in her, right? Not intimidation. Okay. So to dramatize this is really important, to dramatize this whole idea of how the family, how the father, how the mother, how they really feel about Gabby's relationship. That's, I think, a very big part of the dynamics that we don't know about in this case. So that's a really important question that Lifetime have kind of got the opportunity to address. The question is, do they address it well or not? But that's definitely an area that we weren't able to totally get to grips for when this case was taking place. And so this is a great opportunity to sort of say, well, let's do that. Let's get to grips with it. Now, in the same way that ideally you would want to film the events at the Moonflower Co-op, you'd also want to speak to Gabby's parents and say, tell us about things you said. Show us or explain it to us, and then we can dramatize that, right? Right. So, and in the same way that the Moonflower Co-op would say, no ways are you filming that which is negative publicity on our premises. You kind of have the same situation. Do you think Gabby's parents would say, we're going to give you some information about how we maybe disapproved of Gabby, which is not maybe going to reflect very well on us? Or maybe it's going to reshape the story in some way, right? So you're going to dramatize us disapproving of Brian, and that maybe leads to an argument with Gabby. That's not really subject matter that we're terribly comfortable with. That's not really the story maybe we want to talk about. But if you think about this whole idea of, let's talk about DV, let's talk about couples arguing, isn't part of that maybe, I'm talking about young couples, isn't part of that maybe the relationships those couples have with their parents, and what role can parents have in protecting their children, in knowing what's going on with their children. Isn't that an interesting conversation to have with regard to this? I haven't heard it. I haven't heard that conversation. I don't think the conversation about DV with very young couples is just what are the red flags with the couple. What is the red flag with the man in this? Aren't there other red flags as well that go beyond that, like relationships with your parents, my relationship with my parents, his or her relationship with his or her parents? You know what I mean? That, is there mutual respect, right? That's right. So if you think about it, to dramatize this would be incredibly important. It would be incredible if Gabby's family had participated and provided feedback and insight, but there would probably be legal implications. The laundries might sue them, and they'd also probably want to be paid by Lifetime for consulting. So basically, we'll give you some insight, we'll give you some information, but we should be remunerated for that. Right? And you would say, what's wrong with that? Of course, there should be. One of the reasons Lifetime is fairly bad, I think, is because it's fairly low budget. Do you guys agree with that? Lifetime's not like a slick production. I'm talking about overall. Lifetime's productions aren't these slick, big production events. They are fairly low budget. And I think you'd agree with me that it's much lower budget than the Dharma series on Netflix, right? And as a result of it being low budget, they can't get everything they want. They can't, for example, theoretically pay someone to consult, right? So in terms of this idea that Brian needed to have a job, I don't disagree with Nicole if she said that. What do you guys think? If Nicole said Brian really needs to get a job before he gets married, would you agree with that? What do you guys say to that? Wow, that is quite a statement. That is also very true. By trying to be polite, sometimes you need to say something, but everyone's trying to be polite. That's definitely a valid point. So I recently went out with some friends, and they told me that their eldest son, who is about 23 years old, is, in other words, Brian's age, had just decided to get married. This was a few days ago. And that was my first question. Does he have a job? Right? Does he have a job? Oh, you're being so Generation X about this. And the answer was that he did. He had gotten a job. And I think it's the right question. Do you agree? Stephanie does. Jennifer does. Susan does. Helena does. So, I mean, that's something that I don't know if it really came up kind of explicitly. I mean, I certainly thought about it, but that's something that didn't really come up in our discussion of the case when it was like, what happened? People didn't really talk about, did Brian have a job? I'm not saying no one ever mentioned it, but by going through Lifetime's dramatization, do you see how you hit these authentic notes that, yes, that was actually an important point. Brian didn't have a job. What possible problems can you have as a result of that? Well, do you remember Brian stole Gabby's bank cards because he didn't have any money? Brian stole Gabby's car. It was her vehicle. The van was her vehicle because he didn't have a car. If Brian did have money and he did have a vehicle, he did have his own kind of life and income, couldn't the van life thing have been a lot more pleasant? It wasn't all or nothing. Andy says, your channel helps me deal with all of this. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Andy. Okay. So a big pressure point looming over the van life adventure was who or what was going to pay for it. And do you guys know what the answer was to that? So if you said, well, Gabby was making a real effort to become an influencer, what is Brian doing? If they were failing to pay for their expenses, and do you remember one of the lessons they learned from the previous trip was how expensive it was? Remember, Brian and Gabby said so. They basically said, we lived in hotels, we ate in restaurants, and it was really expensive. Well, this time we wanted to try and, like less is more. And there's a post on Brian's Instagram where he says exactly that. We were trying to have this minimalist, less is more existence. Well, guess what? They still needed money. They still needed money for things like fuel. They still needed money for things like food. Even if you're going to sleep in your van, you are still going to be. And do you remember Gabby stayed in that hotel in Salt Lake City about a week before she died? That had to cost money as well. So the money had to come from somewhere. Do you remember while Gabby stayed in that hotel that she called her dad and asked him for, where's that picture? She called her father and asked him to order an Uber dinner. She didn't call Brian. So it's like, Dad, I'm hungry kind of thing. So who's going to pay for this? And what do you think the answer is? Isn't the answer that who's going to have to pay for it would be mom and dad? The mom and dad who have been kind of disapproving of Brian all along, because that's what they don't want to do. If you want to marry Gabby, you need to look after her. No, I want to marry Gabby and then you pay the bill. You pay for it. Okay. Yeah. Julie says they were both working in a supermarket at the same time. That's the other side. Is there were times that he did have a job, but then there were other times that he didn't. That's a good point. Is that true that he couldn't afford to buy an engagement ring? Wouldn't Dad wonder where Brian was and why she wasn't having any food? Well, I think that was when Brian was back in Florida. Okay. So that brings us to kind of this question we've been saying anyway, but let's deal with it properly. Was social media going to pay the bill? So if we kind of move back in time, right, they left, I think, on, was it this 5th of July? They left on the summer epic from New York. So if we go, let's say, to June, early July, right? They're not making really any money from social media in terms of, I think, advertising, although I think they are making a little money putting things up onto social media and selling them. So like flogging clothing, flogging the odd artwork, right? So they were, in a way, you could argue that they were already making some money off social media, but not in the way we're talking about, where you make money off content, not I've got a cap, right? It's quite a nice cap. Who wants this cap for $5, right? Not that. It's, are you watching my video? Are enough people watching my video? And Gabby hadn't even started her YouTube channel until mid-August, right? YouTube really hadn't happened virtually at all until mid-August. Instagram, I suppose you could argue, you could have product placements and all sorts of those arrangements, but even her Instagram was kind of slowly evolving, right? So how long was it going to take? Think about this. How long was it going to take for Gabby's Instagram to become something? But meanwhile, they're actually on the Summer Epic spending money every day. So in other words, on a daily basis, you're going to wake up, eat something, someone's got to pay for that. Drive somewhere, someone's got to pay for that. Camp somewhere, someone's got to pay for that. Meanwhile, you put on an Instagram here and there. Well, how's that going to pay for your food and fuel? And so you ask the question, was social media going to pay the bills? And I think the answer is it is looking pretty unlikely. And so you can sort of look at this in two ways. Was Brian right to be critical and not believe in her, or wrong and he should have believed in her, and even though they kind of couldn't afford it, but nevertheless going along with it, well, and then her family were basically paying for it. You sort of feel like maybe he should have taken a step back since they were paying and allow it to play itself out. But you can also see how if they're paying for everything and it's her idea, he feels invalidated. He feels like this doesn't work. I don't agree with it. Gabby's getting too much attention and I'm producing all of this content for her. I'm taking photos of her, and yet it's all kind of at my expense. Right? So I think Gabby felt, yeah, exactly. A road trip is not cheap. I think Gabby felt that she was the brains behind the whole thing and that Brian should have believed in her. And now Brian's becoming more and more insecure, but Brian's not helping. But it's kind of a difficult situation to be in to begin with. Okay. So the movie version of Petito urges Brian to try and build a social media presence with his artwork. So Gabby's strategy is actually, and this comes from Michael Ruiz from his article, Gabby's strategy is to say to Brian, try and sell your art on Instagram. Try and, we can use me and my Instagram, we go through the scenic places and whatever. But what you need to do is put your art on Instagram and see what you can do with that, right? So the question comes up again, was social media going to pay the bills? And let's put it another way. Was Brian's art going to pay the bills? And I think the answer is no. Why? Because Brian's art was terrible. Brian really wasn't a very good artist. One of the things I was looking forward to seeing in Brian's notebook was art that he was doing during the Summer Epic. One thing I will say for Brian is that he's not a bad photographer. Some of the photos he took of Gabby, I thought, were done quite well. And I'll say that as a photographer. I don't know how much input Gabby had in her own photos, but I thought in a basic way, the photography wasn't bad. Yeah, his artwork was creepy. Yeah, and mostly copying other works of art. So I really don't think he was going to make really a lot of money with his art. I think Gabby could have made more than what he did because I think Gabby was actually a better artist. So my assessment, social media was a huge part of the fabric of this case. We always knew that, just as it was foundational to the Chris Watts case, although I think it's why both cases became as popular and high profile as they did. If Gabby wasn't on Instagram, I don't know, and Brian either, I don't know if it would have gotten that much traction. The Gabby Petito case was perhaps the first case where mainstream media and social media, so mainstream and social media, sort of coalesced and formed this sort of true crime explosion. So, you know, that's another side. If you were doing a dramatization of the story, you could even do a dramatization of the aftermath, showing the gears of social media and the media doing something that, in a weird way, was being seen for the first time on a very large scale in our experience of the media, right? That in itself was something quite sort of historic, right? So let me share with you guys a couple of stats with regard to this. By September 19, 2021, so it was around about the time that Gabby was found, the Gabby Petito hashtag was viewed, let me bring that up, just like that. So this is, I think, just after she was found. The Gabby Petito hashtag was viewed 268 million times. Then 2 days later, it had about doubled. So this is, so do you see I'm going through the media narrative again? September 21, 2021, and the hashtag Gabby Petito has now received more than 650 million views, right? So we're now up to 500 million views, right? And that was on TikTok, and social media users were like trying to find clues here, right? And then there's another article 6 days later, almost a week later, referring to 1 billion views. I'm just trying to see where it says that. The Gabby Petito hashtag on TikTok stands at almost 1 billion views, right? And that was like the first time we'd ever seen this, like in history. It was the first time we'd seen these sort of numbers. It was also the first time I kind of saw TikTok coming into the social media space of true crime. Maybe it had already happened, but it was the first time I saw it, right? And there it is, 1 billion views on the Gabby Petito hashtag. And we thought that was a lot, but we thought, wow, this is really big. And then, of course, you had Depp versus Heard, where that hashtag was viewed 33 billion times. Do you know that's the latest number, that the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp has been viewed, at last count, 33 billion times, right? We thought the Chris Watts case was big, then we thought the Gabby Petito case was big, and now everything keeps seeming to get bigger and bigger. So in terms of this video, anyone know how many times the Gabby and Brian video on van life, basically van life, beginning our van life journey, anyone know how many times it's been viewed thus far? Almost 7 billion views for one video. And she posted it on the 19th of August, and it was never monetized. And her channel has now got 183,000 subscribers. It's almost twice as much as my channel. And she put up one video, one time. So that is the power of social media. So if you make the argument that Gabby would never, or Gabby and Brian would never have made it with social media, the one argument you can make is that today you can make money on social media, or social media can deliver in terms of an income. The other question is, will it deliver? I mean, this is little bit different. This was a sensational case where you had the mainstream media all over the world, social media all over the world, all participating, trying to make an income when it's just you, when there's no media, then it's a little bit different, right? That's definitely a little bit different. Okay. Are you guys finding this discussion meaningful, worthwhile, interesting? I hope so. Okay. So in terms of their Instagram accounts, I think Gabby Petito's Instagram has got 1.2 million, 1.2 million views. I think, is this it? Yeah, 1.2 million followers. I think Gabby would be quite pleased to see that, right? I think if Gabby had survived, and maybe Brian as well, and Gabby's Instagram is 1.2 million, I think she would feel, I can continue the van life journey. We can do this. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for that. But I just want you to think of those words again from the actress playing Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, where she's told by Gabby, Skylar Samuel, saying, "Mom, you're such a Gen Xer," right? There's an aspect to that that's true. This idea of easy money on social media, it's not that easy. But there's also an aspect that is true, that you can make money. So I think parents are in quite a quandary now. If their kids tell them, I'm not going to study, I'm going to become a social media influencer, what do you say? What do you do? Do you set a deadline? Do you help them? I think it's kind of an open question. If your kids decide, I'm going to make a living as an influencer, well, you don't know whether that's going to happen. It's kind of like your concern that any parent has if your kid says, I want to become an artist. Like, I want to become Vincent van Gogh. But then I'm terrified that you're going to struggle your entire life, that you're not going to sell anything, that you're going to waste your life because you're going to struggle. In other words, there's a struggling artist scenario that's part and parcel potentially of being an influencer. Do you guys agree with that? It must be difficult. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you try and criticize, or what's the word, tell your child be realistic, or do you encourage them? Like, how do you strike the balance in them running after a fairy tale and trying to get them to do something that's going to actually work? Definitely. Well, Matt says, I've worked out how to become a patron. Okay. That's sad, isn't it? Okay. So we are, I think, still on number 5. Is it 5 or 4? 4. I just want to wrap up with the social media. So let me bring this up. Any of you know what the number 1 clue is that we all missed with Gabby Petito? Patrons, don't say anything. You guys know, but for the rest of you. Any idea? There's obviously a clue in Brian being circled there. So that is something I'm going to be covering. But I think the social media aspect was fraught for other reasons as well. If Gabby wanted Brian to make money off of social media, as she was trying to do, I think that Brian was a reluctant producer of Gabby's social media. And Do you guys agree that Brian was a producer of Gabby's social media? In other words, he took the photos. He was the person behind the camera while Gabby was smiling and whatever, right? So if Gabby wanted Brian Brian was a reluctant producer of Gabby's social media. Do you guys agree with that? Why do you think that, if that's true, why do you think that was? Why do you think that was the case? If Brian was reluctant, why do you think he would have felt reluctant? Someone says, who took that picture? Eric says, who took that picture? Okay, so we're going to deal in a moment with number 5, a jealous laundry. Yeah, you've just said it, Asa. You've just said it. So think about it. If social media's had such a massive influence in our lives, definitely had a big influence in mine, for better and for worse. I don't know about yours. It's had a big influence on our lives, on our relationships. I don't know if social media's had an impact on your relationship. It's definitely had an impact on mine. Why wouldn't it be instrumental in the dynamics and motive in true crime cases like this one? So if you say, just in a general way, you say, wow, social media has had a big impact on my life. Do you think it had an impact on Gabby Petito's life? Do you think it had an impact on Brian Laundrie's life? Do you think it had an impact on Kylie Rodney? Do you think it had an impact on Alec Baldwin? Do you think it had an impact on Chris Watts? Do you think it had an impact on, and so on and so on, right? Now, I don't think you can say that it doesn't have a big impact when it's impacting everyone all the time. It is now one of the big things that is impacting us one way or the other. When it impacts you positively, it may impact someone that's close to you negatively, and vice versa. So I think the fact is Brian was a lousy artist. He lacked the personality and the chutzpah to be an influencer, just like Chris Watts. I also think he was lazy. Do you guys agree with that, or do you disagree with that? Do you think Brian was a hardworking guy? Do you think he had a good work ethic? I think that he was lazy. I think to get somewhere on social media requires hard work. Not like a little bit of hard work, a lot of hard work, certainly at some point. I think if you get a lucky break, then it can be easier, but it tends to be hard work and also commitment. Did Brian have the hard work and commitment to do social media? I think Gabby did. I don't know if Brian did. And you can ask the same questions about Jeffrey Dahmer, by the way. Was he lazy? Was Jeffrey Dahmer a committed person? Did he have a work ethic? Simple question. The problem is when you don't, it opens the door to all sorts of evil and problems, because you've got to deal with the problems all of us have. And because you're lazy, you cheat. You deal with them in a way that's not very good. So often I think when there's a true crime case and you have a suspect, you really want to ask, did the suspect have a job? Because an obvious way that somebody cheats, like, because most of us work and we make money and we solve problems the normal way, or somebody who doesn't work, doesn't have a job, doesn't have a life, hasn't done that work at becoming a person, well, then they want to cheat at doing that. They want to steal, which Brian did. They are lazy because they don't want to work. they don't want to make something of themselves, or they're too afraid, or they're too insecure, or they're too weak. They're too weak as people to kind of make something of themselves, right? Interesting subject matter, right? So in an excellent long-form article on Gabby Petito, Kathleen Hale, an author writing for Vanity Fair, that's from this article, if it's going to come up, she described Brian Laundrie as a lazy couch surfer. These aren't great traits in a marriage partner or for a career as a social media influencer, certainly not the lazy part. So just in that aspect of, how can I put it? Brian wants to marry Gabby, and Nicole says, well, I think he needs to have a job. That ended up being probably the crucial issue. And I think she was right. But I suppose you could also say Gabby was 22, kind of let her make her own mistakes. Well, a mistake can cost you your life in love sometimes, unfortunately. Mel says, how many followers did Gabby have before she died? I think it was a couple of hundred. Not 100% sure, maybe 300 or 400, I don't know. It's hard to say. Lunchman says most people who set off on a fantasy, traveling van life, camping life, are lazy. And when all the work it takes to live that start piling up, they tap out. Yeah. They think the fantasy of the fairy tale is going to be great, but they don't actually think about the work that's involved. And so when they're there, it's like, I'd rather lie around at camp and take photos and swim in a nice pool. I don't really want to work. Why must I work? It's all one big holiday, right? So let's deal now with the jealous laundry. So I did bring this up earlier. Sorry, that's not the one I wanted to bring up. A jealous laundry. So again, that is a really interesting question. How do you dramatize a jealous laundry in, where is it? How do you dramatize a jealous laundry in this movie? So if you were asked, how do you dramatize it? And I don't know if you guys have seen the trailer. There's that point where Brian's in the restaurant, the actor playing Brian, and then he says something about, you want to show off to the whole world, and he looks like he smacks a plate of crisps or something, a plate of something or fries on the table. And I thought, I don't think he did that. It captures that is temperamental and moody and aggressive, but I don't think he ever slapped a plate of fries off the table. In other words, jealousy and his temperament's not quite as obvious or simple as that. Mel says, I'd be terrified if a son came to me and said he's going to be a social media influencer. Yeah. So jealousy, as they say, can make you nasty. Brian was jealous and possessive of Gabby, and partly because he hadn't created much of a life or persona besides his relationship with her. Do I have that picture? No, I don't. Thought I had it. Okay. Let's bring that back up. Tamik, just calm down. I'm almost finished. Okay. So this is number 5. It's not going to take long to get through this. Brian was jealous and possessive of Gabby, partly because he hadn't created much of a life or persona besides his relationship with her. In other words, Brian's identity was basically Gabby. Who I am is, well, I'm engaged to Gabby, and that's kind of all he was, right? Put otherwise, he hadn't created enough of a life or an identity beyond his life and identity with Gabby. So if Gabby wasn't there, well, then he had no life. He didn't exist. So in a weird and sick way, Jeffrey Dahmer also didn't create much of a life and an identity besides through his fantasy world, which was necessarily sexual. And that kind of brings us back to, well, I'm out of focus. Timmy, you're taking the focus off me. Timmy, it's not good for my social media. Or maybe actually it is. Hey? Okay, let's try and do that. I think I may. It's not going to work. Timmy just kicked my keyboard. I think, okay, well, that's a little bit better anyway. Sometimes when I go out of focus, I think it's because the camera can't actually make out, well, this guy doesn't have hair, so it's not actually, let's try and look for a person, right? Anyway, yeah, that's exactly right. Timmy's got a little bit of, I think he's a bit stir crazy. So I will take him for a walk after this. Anyway, so like Jeffrey Dahmer, and it is quite a crazy comparison to make. If you think about it, it's quite a crazy comparison to make Brian Laundrie and Jeffrey Dahmer, right? You might say totally different, but I think the area that is similar is that Brian feels like he's a nothing without the sort of sexual connection to somebody, and I think he feels undermined and emasculated, and that he's having a sexual competition with other men and whatever. And Gabby's like this sexual object. Gabby's like a trophy that he wants to possess and keep. And that's sort of all that he's interested in. And Jeffrey Dahmer kind of had the same thing going on. Because Brian's life is so pathetic, Gabby's importance is so elevated. Gabby is so important in a way because Brian is so unimportant, because Gabby's got so much value to Brian because Brian has nothing of value otherwise in his life, or very little of value, right? What does Mel say? Gabby was the new butterfly, Brian was the crawling cockroach. Jay Ballou says parents are too enabling today. That's also an interesting point. Do you see how the Gabby Petito case raises issues of independence, of dependence as well, of in terms of a relationship being emotionally dependent, in terms of a relationship being realistic, controlling your emotions, setting boundaries, all of those things. Also recognizing what's going on, right? So according to this article, the Daily Mail reported on September 21 that a jealous Laundrie once stole Petito's driver's license to keep her from going out with a Florida friend, Rose Davis. So that then brings us to the next point, intertextualities. Have you guys thought of this as an intertextuality? In other words, the fact that Brian was jealous and then he stole Gabby's driver's license. This was before the van life epic, right? To control her. The fact that Brian was jealous, he thought was enough reason to steal from her, to take her driver's license. In other words, he felt, I'm justified because I'm jealous. Because I'm jealous, I can do this. Because I'm jealous, I can control her. because I'm jealous, I can steal, right? That gives you an idea that it's not just ordinary jealousy, it's a lot of jealousy. It's a desperate jealousy. It's an ugly, nasty, evil jealousy. It's a jealousy that sort of comes from a good place, loving someone, but it ultimately manifests in a very nasty way, which is, if I can't have you, no one can. And also, if you're not here anymore, I don't even want to live. That's not a very healthy jealousy, is it? So I'm not sure if I'd actually considered the intertextuality of Brian stealing Gabby's driver's license and then later stealing her bank cards and her vehicle. Think about that intertextuality. Before he steals her driver's license, which is a card, then later on, after the murder, he steals a bank card and a vehicle. He steals a card, he steals a card. He steals her life, he steals her vehicle. Do you see that? But can you see how even before the crime, he was a slippery, dishonest, I think it feels like he was a lazy person, a weaseling kind of individual. And Jeffrey Dahmer was too. Let me say that again. He was a slippery, dishonest, and it feels like lazy, weaseling kind of individual, before and after. Who's Tyson Fury? Is that a compliment? Tyson Fury, let's have a look. Interesting. A boxer, okay. Suppose it's a kind of physical compliment. Jody says, I'm so late to this, no notification. Jody, aren't you on Twitter? Okay. So going back to the article, Brian took her ID just so she wouldn't be able to come out with me, and that's what she told an outlet, I think the Daily Mail. That's what he told. That's what Rose told the Daily Mail. And the scene is recreated in the film where Laundrie has a moment alone with Petito's purse as she's getting dressed to head out. So that's another authentic moment. And that then brings us to the final aspect. Rose is a voice of reason. I see we had kind of 90 minutes and my dog is getting desperate as well. So let's finish off with this. Another relative mystery in the Gabby Petito story is Rose. We know about her, we know what she said, but she's also been relatively quiet and mysterious. Do you agree with that? That Rose kind of gave one interview. I know that's not Rose in the picture. I'm just saying Rose gave one interview, maybe two, but she spoke very little as Gabby's best friend. Remember Rose. It's quite a poor image. See if I can get a better one. That's a bit better. But if you think about it, we really didn't hear much from Rose. And so Rose plays quite a prominent role as, instead of a disapproving parent, Mom, you so Gen X. Well, now you've got Gen Z telling you, is it going to work? Or, yeah, keep trying, you just need a break with social media. But then also, what does Rose say about Brian? And how does Gabby respond to that? D. Briggs says, where did he learn about the bad traits? Do we know when the cases are going to court? I'm not sure which one you're referring to. PAO or Power says, where can we see the movie? Well, it's on the Lifetime channel. That is the problem. It's not everyone has access to it. It used to be on My Bouquet with cable, but now it isn't anymore. So according to this article, Davis did not immediately respond to a request for comment Friday on her prominent role in the film, in which she is depicted as a voice of reason in Petito's life. Now, what do you guys think? Do you think that Rose was consulted? Thanks a lot, Yvonne. We do remember Rose. Brian was jealous of her too. Very good point. Thanks a lot, Yvonne. So, do you think that Rose was consulted and that Rose did speak to Lifetime, and Lifetime kind of got an idea from her? Well, I would imagine no. I would imagine Lifetime didn't talk to her or to the parents, because to do that, you would imagine there would be some contract and some feeling of, well, you need to pay, right? And I don't think Lifetime really works that way. And I'm speaking from a little bit of experience. Roses are red. Good to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Right. So did Rose approve of Brian? Probably in the same way that Gabby's parents did. She may have not liked him. She may have seen some things that she didn't think were very promising or very encouraging or very positive. But the point was that Gabby did like him. Gabby did seem to like him. And Gabby was 22 years old and responsible, you would think, for her own choices. Right? I think that is what the people around Gabby thought. It's the same thing I'm thinking about one of my best friend's sons. He wants to get married, and so you hear, well, he's quite young, he does have a job. Okay, well, I guess we'll find out, but I mean, I guess he's 23 years old. He must make decisions, and he will find out, like we all do, like we all did. So isn't that kind of what happened here? And the same thing with Kylie Rodney. Gabby was 22 years old. She's made a decision and she's got to live with it and she's got to deal with it. Isn't that what people around her thought? You can't hold on to this person forever. Same with Kylie Rodney. She's 16 years old. She's responsible for what's about to happen to her. She's about to go to college. She's going to need to look after herself. And in that sort of thing where you say, you know what, I love you, I want to protect you, I really wish you didn't do this, I really wish you weren't with this person, but I am actually going to have to take my hands off and let you make your own mistakes and allow you to make decisions. And in that space, things can go wrong. Things do go wrong. That's life. It's also, you don't expect a murderer to come out of that situation. Who would? That is definitely true, but I also think there's also a huge difference between what Gabby did, right, and what Kylie was doing. I think there's a big difference with that as well. So, as I said, the same conversation is taking place right now about a 16-year-old. Apparently, someone else is responsible for her choices, her parents, her friends, or a bogeyman. When you were 16 or 22, were you also arguing that someone else should have agency over your life? So, people that are watching here and people who are talking and thinking about this in true crime, were you saying, it's that person's fault? No. Maybe it's that person. There is a suspect. It's her parents, her friends. There's some sort of dark thing taking place. In other words, Kylie's the absolute innocent victim, and someone else is the absolute guilty perpetrator. In the same way, Gabby's the absolute innocent victim, and she had no agency of her own life. And all of this is somebody else's fault. But think about it, when you were 16 or when you were 22, were you also arguing that someone else should have agency over your life? Were you also arguing that someone must decide what I should do with my life? I'm talking about when you were 16 or 22. Think about when you were 16 and wanted to drive. Think about when you were 22 and wanted to go go somewhere, travel overseas, go to have a relationship with someone. I know when I was 20, 21, 22, I wanted to go to Europe, and my father didn't allow it or wouldn't allow it. I wasn't arguing that he was right. I wasn't arguing that he should have agency over my life or that he should have more agency over my life. I was arguing that I had enough agency. So why are all these people in true crime arguing that no, 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 these people had no agency in their own lives, meaning Gabby had no responsibilities for the choices she made, no responsibilities for, I'm talking about, this is the guy that I want to be with, this is where we're going to go, and this is how we're going to deal with these situations. And also Kylie Rodney. Does she have absolutely no agency about what she chooses to do with her time, where she chooses to go on a Friday night, right? And so at the same time that you want to take away all their agency, what about your own agency? I can tell you now, I'm 50 years old. I'm more than twice the age I was when I was wanting to go to Europe. I really needed to go then. And I really got my life on track after traveling for a year and going overseas for a while. And a lot of that was I was trying to develop agency of my life, and I needed to do certain things, right? And only once I went overseas and came back did that agency really fully, what's the word? It was fully established. But it could have been fully established. I ended up going overseas when I was 27, and I went for just under 3 years, and then I went again for 4 to 5 years. But I grew up much quicker in that time than in the years I spent at university. Thanks a lot, Roses Are Red, appreciate it. And Helena, thanks a lot. So do you agree that, we're talking about the Lifetime movie that no one should watch and it's too soon, and seems like no other true crime channels are talking about it, none that I know about. Isn't this an interesting conversation? Isn't a year later quite a good perspective to have on all of those things that we saw, and to say we had all that information, some of our emotions have shifted, some of our perspective is a little bit different. Now is quite a good time to reflect on all of that, and kind of come to a sense, not of closure, but kind of draw a conclusion, and try and see what is it that we're talking about here. Isn't there value in that? Isn't there value in doing that, in having that conversation? Isn't it strange that there was 1 billion views on Gabby Petito, and a year later, like none? Like, what are the creators doing right now? Are they just forgotten about it? Some of those creators came completely out of obscurity, like they were like micro channels, right? Came completely out of obscurity, right? Because of the Gabby Petito case. Even now, they by far their most popular videos are on Gabby Petito. But thank you very much. I don't really have anything to say about it now. I'm moving on to the next high-profile case. Helena says, should we watch it? Do you recommend it? Stephanie says, I'm glad we're talking about Gabby. She was a beautiful light. So this is the part to me of the hypocrisy of true crime, the trash culture tendency towards blaming and scapegoating. It's always somebody else's fault. It's the party goers in the Kylie Rodney case. It's the boyfriend in the Kylie Rodney case. In Gabby Petito, it's Brian Laundrie, and I'm not saying it's not Brian Laundrie, but there was also the question from Gabby's side, right? The choice that Gabby had after the Moab incident, the reality of what happened, the reality that Gabby knew what happened at the Moab incident, to continue with the van life journey. And we saw that, and it was kind of a heartbreaking moment where the officer kind of said, you're going to need to go to trial. You're going to need to go to court and deal with the fact that you hit Brian. And Gabby kind of sees that as we're not going to be able to continue our adventure. And so that's where her thoughts were. She was kind of insisting on a fairy tale that wasn't real to begin with. She was insisting on a relationship that was obviously not working. And that's the part that I think you've got to think about is, have you done what Gabby Petito did? You were so kind of focused on your fairy tale, and all of us have been, that when these things were becoming, and I hate to use the word red flags because people say that word all the time now, but you have this big red flag of the police are there asking you about where you were hit and you actually wounded, and you're saying it's not a big deal and he didn't do anything, and please let's just give me a ticket. Remember how she cried? She said, please just give me a ticket so that we can keep going on this thing. Just want to bring up that very sad image. Where is it? This one. And so I'm not trying to blame Gabby, and I'm not trying to say it's all on her. I'm saying, have you been in that situation where you were so desperate and so fixated on your fairy tale that the red flag flapping right in front of you, you wouldn't see that? And what I'm trying to say is, you must also recognize the moment that you need to exercise agency in your own life. And that applies whether you're 16, 22, 42, or 60, where you have a moment of recognizing your responsibility to yourself, to your situation, to exercise agency. Well, do you? Are you going to do that? Or is it going to be somebody else's fault? Helena says, I understand that. It took me many years to get out. And the whole true crime community, it feels like to me, are caught up in the ecstasy and the feel-good factor of it's always somebody else to blame. Let's blame this person, let's blame that person. There's never self-awareness. There's never a sense of introspection. There's never looking at ourselves. Always, it's either you or you pointing out someone and red flags in somebody else. Do you ever point out red flags in yourself? And that's popular. It's popular to do that. It's not so popular to say, look within. Is there anything wrong with me? That's not so popular. It's incredibly popular going after someone else and blaming them. I don't really see any comments here that are really picking up on what I'm saying. So I think I'm actually going to leave it here. But I'm just trying to get at that. I've learned that the true crime community is not about truth or justice and accountability. That's what I thought it was. I thought true crime was about truth, justice, and accountability. But I've learned it's actually about blaming and being titillated by one witch hunt after another, where you're always holding someone else responsible for what happens, whether or not it's true. That's the other part. It's popular, it feels good, but it's hardly anchored in reality or in facts. But that is what people want, to be told things are someone else's fault. So if you've got a child or you've got somebody who wants to make a living in true crime or on social media, here is the formula. Give people what they want, tell people what they want. What people want is to be told everything is someone else's fault. There it is. There's a formula for success. Go on to true crime and tell people what they want to hear. Look at the comments that you're getting, and then say it's always somebody else's fault. There it is. You make a living from that. I really appreciate that, Eric, because I don't want to be part of that community either. In fact, I've been thinking about changing the name of my channel because I don't like those people who say I'm true crime. I don't want to be associated with that anymore. I sort of feel like true crime, what I'm seeing, feels like trash culture. So the fact that my channel is called True Crime Rocket Science, I sort of feel like I don't want to call it true crime anymore, because to me, true crime has discredited itself. The true crime that I've looked at and that I know, and the majority of it that I'm seeing, right? So I was thinking of changing my channel to Authentic Rocket Science, or ARS, or ARS, right? Seriously, I have been thinking of changing the channel because true crime isn't what I signed up for. It's not anchored in facts anymore. It's anchored in sensation and populism. And I'm disheartened to see something like the Lifetime movie covering a case that I cared about, right? Where's everyone else who was supposed to care about it? Where are they? Are they just covering other cases now? Is that how schizophrenic and selective your memory is when it comes to an important case that touched all of us? Sorry, there's no money to be made. Sorry, it's not popular. It's too soon. Okay, so we just won't talk about it. Carol says, I can't watch most of the YouTube channels anymore. So I'm just saying, I honestly want to, yeah, Timmy Talk, that could work. I honestly am thinking of removing the true crime from the TCRS brand and label and name. And to me, the most authentic voice in true crime means almost nothing when the whole landscape is inauthentic. And then you're criticized by a lot of inauthentic people that it's such a joke that you think your channel's authentic. True crime, the whole true crime landscape is now trash culture, or it feels like that. It feels like a lot of the true crime landscape is trash culture. It's tabloid, it's sensational, it's shallow, it's fiction over fact, it's popular over, it's hate views over the facts. It's uneducated as well. Lunchman says, don't change the channel name, but maybe get a profile pic that says ours. Yeah. Mel says, I love it that we're talking about Gabby Petito. So I want to, I actually wrote a much longer script. I was going to go into that whole fake crime thing in a much bigger way. But I think Timmy wants me to get outside, and that's what I want to do as well. The sun has come up, so I'm going to do that. But I want to leave you guys with a final thought. I want to leave you guys with a final thought. Obviously, those on Patreon, I wrote all of this out. It really took hours and hours to do that. It took hours to put all of this together, and I'm not even going to touch on it in this video. But the part I do feel I want to touch on is I didn't know until I covered American cases. And the first case I covered was Jodi Arias in, I think, 2015 or so. This idea of celebrating or remembering or acknowledging the anniversaries of true crime cases. That's exactly why we are here right now. That's why I'm here. I'm acknowledging the 1 year anniversary. That's what the Lifetime movie was also doing, right? We don't have it in South Africa. Even our most high profile cases here, people seem to want to forget about them. When they come up, just nothing is really mentioned. But in America, these anniversaries are remembered. John Bonet is remembered 25 years later. Madeleine McCann, 15 years later, except when the European court overturns something, then no one remembers or no one pays attention to it. In a few weeks, Amanda Knox and Meredith Kercher will be remembered on that 15-year anniversary. I think it is important to remember. So if we were so invested in these stories that we remember them a year later or 2 years later or 10 years later, should we rather let it go, right? Tomorrow, and that's tomorrow my time, it'll be a year since my friend Alex, one of the most important people in my life, someone I shared many stories with, experiences, died in horrific circumstances on the 3rd of October, a Sunday morning last year. And I remember that morning like it was 5 minutes ago. I remember where I was, what I did, what I felt, what I saw, like it was 5 minutes ago. Tomorrow it'll be 1 year ago. I don't only remember him on October the 3rd. I've probably thought about him each day, every day of the past year. I'm going to just take myself out of the picture. In a strange way, I associate the Gabby Petito case with Alex because I was covering that case when I lost my friend. And so the grief, the anxiety, the emotions, it wasn't hypothetical to me what Gabby's folks and what Rose and even what the Laundries were going through. My friend's death also made headlines in the news. I found out about his death on social media. It's traumatic. It's traumatizing. So what Lifetime does is it caters to an audience. And this is the last thing I want to say really about this. When Lifetime What Lifetime does is it caters to an audience who wants to remember. It's been doing this for years. It'll continue to do this as well. Some people want to remember and some want to forget. We all grieve in our own way. Some remember things the way they were and care about remembering things properly and correctly. I'm one of those people. Some remember things the way they are, not the way things were, the way they remember it through themselves, and they don't care about the details. Lifetime's movie, in a general sense, draws attention to DV. Talking about this movie about Gabby Petito. In a general sense, it's drawing attention to DV. Isn't that a good thing? If you don't care, is it okay that someone else does? Oh, but if we're not making money out of it, don't pay attention to it. This story captivated America and the world beyond America for months. The hashtag got over 1 billion views. But now, because we're not captivated, we don't pay attention to it. We're captivated by something else now. Really? Are we that shallow? Here today, gone tomorrow. That's not how I think about my friend Alex. I don't think that should be how we think about Gabby. Is that genuine interest in a person? Do we have genuine interest in the person? Or is it a kind of cultural schizophrenia? Is there an authentic interest in these people who lost their lives? Or is it a kind of heartless and selective psychopathy of our own? Is true crime becoming a kind of fickle, superficial, tabloidy trash culture? What do you guys think? So someone says, unfortunately, this movie will not change anything. Well, I think it did show some of these insights, some of these authentic points. So, that is worth something, right? Those authentic notes. So I'm not going to take it further. I hope you guys have found this live stream worth it. I found it worth it. I hope you guys have. That is it. That is it. And we remember the details and we try to make sure, I don't know how much, what sort of legacy I'm going to have. I don't know what sort of legacy my books are going to have. I don't know what sort of legacy my work is going to have. Might have zero legacy. But I would hope that it kind of helps some people deal with reality and find their way to a reality that's constructive and helps them in their lives. If that is the case for one person, I will feel I've achieved my goal. If one person's life has gone the right direction because they've let go of their fairy tale and they've been realistic about their lives or a partner, and they've started using the thinking approach that we use in true crime rocket science to find out what is going on in situations, and that's helped your life, well, then that means something. And I hope that that is the case. I really do hope that is the case. True crime has become a conveyor belt. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Onesie. Thanks for that. Definitely. Sounds good. Appreciate it. That's nice to think about. I don't know if I believe it, but I think about that in a different way. Introspection can be infinite. You must sometimes stop. Sometimes you need to stop chewing on the bone and look outward, and not introspection is necessary, but it can be infinite. Yvonne says, you are right. We can be so shallow, but you are helping us and we are helping you too, for sure. I've definitely felt your kindness, your love, your compassion, your interest, your attention. From, when I criticize the true crime community, I'm not criticizing my community. I'm not criticizing you guys, Yvonne, Stephanie, Terry. You guys all know who you are. It's the broader culture that's emerging that's so disturbing, and I don't like it. Jennifer says that. Okay. I don't know if I would go that far, but I would hope that it's just had a positive impact. If you think about Lifetime, it's trying to in its own way. It's trying to tell a real story in an accurate way. And Thora Birch actually says that we try to be accurate, we try to be whatever. And I kind of have a problem with that. I'm not going to deal with it now, but just in all those photos of Gabby, I mean, the classic one is this one. You know, there you've got a photo of Gabby with those butterflies. Sorry, this one. There you've got it right there. You've got that photo of Gabby. Well, then duplicate that in a way that's accurate. Don't do that. Do work harder, try harder. Because if you can't be trusted with a simple detail like that, how can you be trusted with the truth of this case? Right? That's just how I feel. I think you've got to work hard and pay attention and be conscientious about the details, because the details do matter. They matter more than we know. And we must be accountable to those details, and we must be accountable to the story. Be accountable to Gabby's story. And that's what I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing creators being accountable to the people that they're telling stories about. They're not being accountable to the people that they're telling stories about. And the people that love them, that make them so popular, aren't holding them accountable either. They're just saying, I want to think about this. I just find it just a disgrace. Stephanie, if you look at that photo, I mean, Gabby's actually in the sunshine. There's sunshine on her. She's kind of in the shadow. There's sunshine on Gabby here. There's none of that here. It's little details like that. I care about them, and that's just in terms of light. What about the actual details of the story? What someone said, what someone thought, what someone felt, what someone did. Can we tell a true story? Can we tell a true story realistically? Can we see reality? Can we remember reality? And I think the answer is we're really bad at it, and it worries me. Carol, good to see you here as well. So I just wanted to share some of those thoughts. Believe me, there are a lot more where that came from. Put it in a post on Patreon. I really went into quite a lot of detail, but I'm not going to take it further for right now. I am probably going to cover the number one clue we all missed, if I can find it here. Where is it? There it is. The number one clue that we all missed, that'll be a follow-up episode to this one. Won't be a live, but that I want to sort of cover in a day or so. And I think you're going to find that a very interesting analysis where it deals with the dynamic between Brian and Gabby, the psychology, which I think is a strength of my channel. Thinking about who these people were, what they really felt, what they really believed, why things really went the way they went and worked the way they did. And I think this episode dealing with that is going to touch on that. So make sure you don't miss that. I'm also going to be doing something on Jeffrey Dahmer, but we're just waiting for Stephanie to get well and for her voice to sort of come back. And so that's something we might do at the end of this week. So that is it. So I'm going to sign off now. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I'm going to sign off now. I'm probably not going to be as active on YouTube in October as I was in September, touch wood, or even August. But I am hoping to, what I do put up, to be quality. Also, I'm doing these lives because I'm awake through the night. And so once I'm in a proper sleep cycle, I'll probably not do as many lives. I want to get back to fitness, and I want to get back to a bit of a more balanced lifestyle and healthy lifestyle. And I want to encourage you guys to do the same. I know what I'm binging next. Okay. Jane says, I don't know this story. Sorry, I will watch. So I still want to see the Lifetime movie. I still haven't seen it. If I do see it, if I do get to watch the whole thing, I'll do a brief review. It won't be nearly as long as this, but just on the things that I noticed, on the things that stood out to me. If you are watching this analysis, this live on replay, if you find it worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button. Also, leave a comment about what you saw in the movie that made an impression, something you agreed with, something you didn't think about, or something you disagreed with. It'll just be interesting for those who haven't seen it to share in your experience. DL Briggs says, I had sympathy for Brian Laundrie's sister and her family. Mel says, this story captivated Canada. Okay. All right. Stephanie, I'm going to let you go. I think you must get some sleep. Please get well. Take care of yourself. Drink some water. Rest. Terry, make sure you take some notes while you're watching. Mel says a lot of the so-called true crime channels only repeat tabloid headlines. Okay, I'm gonna take Timmy where he wants to go. I'm gonna give him his wish. Take care, guys. Have a good night's sleep. See you guys next time.